The content in this video is based on factual, real-life events and public records. All opinions expressed are for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised, as some scenes may depict sensitive content. This video is intended for informative purposes and complies with YouTube's guidelines. For more than a century, two prisons have shaped America's darkest conversations about punishment and humanity. Angola in Louisiana, once a slave plantation, still carries the weight of forced labor, life without parole sentences, and stories of men who entered the gates as teenagers and never walked out again. And over 1,000 miles north, Attica's name remains forever tied to a single moment: the historic 1971 uprising that exposed a prison system built on desperation, neglect, and a dangerous absence of hope. This documentary pulls back the curtain on both institutions, revealing the psychological toll of long-term confinement, the hidden realities behind daily survival, and the lingering impact each prison has on officers, families, and entire communities. Through verified accounts and historical evidence, we explore what happens when punishment becomes a lifetime and when silence becomes a weapon more powerful than chains. If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content. Angola and Attica stand like two giants on opposite ends of the American map, each carved into the national memory for reasons that are as disturbing as they are unforgettable. When people speak of the most feared prisons in the United States, these two names rise to the top, not because of myths or exaggerations, but because of histories built on trauma, resistance, and the unchanging weight of institutional power. Their stories reveal two different Americas, one born out of the remnants of the plantation South, the other shaped by northern industrial conflict and political tension. Yet both remain linked by the same uncomfortable truth: when human beings are pushed past their breaking point, the darkness inside any prison walls becomes impossible to contain. Angola, officially known as the Louisiana State Penitentiary, sits on 18,000 acres of former plantation land. Even today, the landscape carries the imprint of the enslaved people who once labored there. Rows of fields stretching toward the horizon, watchtowers rising like sentinels, and armed guards on horseback patrolling the perimeter in scenes eerily similar to the past America claims to have left behind. The prison earned the nickname, the Alcatraz of the South, not because it was surrounded by water, but because of its reputation for being nearly impossible to escape, physically or mentally. For decades, Angola operated under a system where inmates worked the same land their ancestors once toiled on, with accusations of abuse and forced labor creating a direct historical line between slavery and incarceration. Walking into Angola is not just entering a prison. It's stepping into a place where time feels layered, where the present sits directly on top of the past. Stories of violence, corruption, and extreme punishment circulate around the facility, blending with tales of resilience and survival from the men who lived through it. Many former inmates have described Angola as a world of its own, a place where every day was a battle to protect your dignity, your safety, and your sanity. In its earliest years, the prison was notorious for brutal conditions, inadequate medical care, overcrowded dorms, inmate-run violence, and a hierarchy that determined who lived peacefully and who lived in fear. Even today, Angola's history makes it one of the most studied prisons in the world, not only for its size, but for the legacy it carries. Thousands of miles away, Attica Correctional Facility in New York was built with a different purpose and in a different era, yet its story is just as haunting. Located in a quiet New York town far from the urban chaos of Buffalo or New York City, Attica became the model of strict northern discipline. The facility was designed to be cold, controlled, and unbreakingly structured, a place where rules were absolute and disobedience was met with swift punishment. But by the late 1960s, the nation was changing. Civil rights movements, protests against inequality, and demands for justice were spreading across the country, and those same demands began rising inside Attica's walls. The inmates at Attica lived in overcrowded conditions, with bitter racial divisions and little access to basic necessities. Complaints about medical neglect, abusive guards, and lack of human rights piled up for years. What the outside world did not see was the boiling pressure inside the prison, a pressure that would eventually erupt into the most infamous prison uprising in American history. In September 1971, thousands of inmates took control of parts of the facility, demanding humane treatment, education, fair discipline, and protection from abuse. Their demands were broadcast worldwide, turning Attica into a symbol of resistance and the fight for prisoner rights. But the standoff did not end peacefully. The retaking of Attica was violent, deadly, and chaotic, leaving deep wounds that the state would struggle to explain for decades. The tragedy transformed Attica from just another prison into a historic turning point, a moment that forced the nation to confront its prison system and the humanity of the people inside it. What connects Angola and Attica? Two prisons separated by distance, culture, and political environments, is the reality that both became mirrors reflecting the deeper problems within American society. Angola showed how old systems of control and exploitation could evolve but never completely disappear. Attica showed how oppression and silence could lead to a breaking point that demanded national attention. Both institutions remind us that prisons are not isolated worlds. They are extensions of the values, fears, and decisions of the society that builds them. In both prisons, inmates lived under conditions that challenged their sense of identity and their mental well-being. For some men, Angola felt like the past reaching forward to swallow the present. For others, Attica felt like a pressure cooker designed to push human beings beyond their limits. Whether in the rural South or the industrial North, the experience of imprisonment carved deep psychological scars: fear of violence, distrust of authority, isolation from family, and the crushing weight of long sentences. Even decades later, survivors describe their time there in tones that mix trauma with a strange, unspoken pride for having lived through it. And so, when we begin the story of Angola and Attica, we are not simply talking about prisons. We are examining two national symbols, two battlegrounds where race, power, punishment, and survival collided. Their histories invite us to look deeper into the system itself and to understand how easily human suffering can be hidden behind concrete, razor wire, and the silence of isolation. Angola and Attica are more than buildings. They are warnings, reminders, and testimonies to the cost of a justice system that often forgets the humanity of the people it controls. Stepping deeper into Angola is like entering a world that moves on its own rhythm, slow, heavy, and burdened with history. The prison is so vast that it feels more like a self-contained country than a correctional institution, with farmland stretching into the distance and rows of crops growing under the Louisiana sun. From above, you see the fields arranged in perfect lines, but from ground level, the sight is far more unsettling. Inmates in bright orange uniforms working under the watch of guards on horseback, a scene that blurs the line between past and present. The first thing newcomers notice is the silence, not a calm, peaceful silence, but the kind that sits heavy in the air, as if the land itself is holding on to memories that refuse to fade. Men who enter Angola quickly learn that survival is built on routine. The days begin early, often before sunrise, when prisoners are moved out toward the fields or toward crowded workshops where they sew uniforms, repair machinery, or work long shifts with little rest. Despite modern regulations, many former inmates describe Angola's labor system as grueling, physically draining, and psychologically exhausting. The heat is punishing, especially in the summer months when temperatures climb high enough to make the metal tools burn the skin. Even so, the work continues, hour after hour, under the watchful eyes of armed officers who patrol the fields like riders from another era. Inside the cell blocks, the environment is no kinder. The buildings are old, the walls are worn, and the air is thick with humidity. Prison dorms often house dozens of men in tight spaces, creating a constant tension that never fully breaks. One small argument over a bed, a piece of commissary, or even the wrong look can quickly escalate into something far more dangerous. Some inmates describe the dorms as places where you sleep lightly and wake up ready, because in Angola, danger doesn't always announce itself. It just appears. And yet the harshness of the environment is only part of the story. Angola has long been criticized for its use of solitary confinement, a system that keeps individuals isolated in small cells for 23 hours a day. Men who experienced years in isolation talk about time stretching in unnatural ways, the days blending together, the silence becoming a living thing, and the mind playing tricks to fill the emptiness. Some describe hearing voices that aren't there. Others speak of pacing their cells until they no longer felt the floor beneath their feet. Solitary confinement at Angola isn't just a punishment. It's a test of psychological endurance that many struggle to recover from. The prison's hospital tells another chapter in Angola's story. For years, reports highlighted long delays in medical attention, understaffed units, and a lack of proper care for aging inmates. Angola holds one of the largest populations of elderly prisoners in the United States, many serving life sentences with no possibility of parole. In this environment, the hospital becomes less a place of healing and more a reminder of time, how slowly it moves, how heavily it weighs, and how inevitably it claims every man inside. Former inmates describe seeing wheelchairs lined up in corridors, men too old or too sick to walk, but still serving sentences that outlive their bodies. Despite its darkness, Angola is also a place that forces men to adapt, to find ways of creating meaning inside a world built to strip it away. Some inmates pour themselves into studying, reading law books, or completing GED programs. Others find solace in music, religion, or the rare quiet moments when they can sit outside and look across the field toward the distant horizon. A few turn to trust, slowly, carefully, building friendships with other men who understand that survival here requires watching each other's backs. But even these moments of connection are overshadowed by the weight of Angola's past. At the center of the prison sits a museum that displays artifacts from its early history. Old uniforms, rusted chains, and black and white photographs of prisoners standing in cotton fields. Visitors walk through the exhibits, some in shock, others in disbelief. But the men living inside don't need a museum to understand that history. They live in it every day, stepping into fields worked by generations before them, sleeping in buildings that have held countless men, and hearing stories whispered from cell to cell about things that happened long before they arrived. Angola's reputation is built not just on its vast size or its violent past, but on the psychological imprint it leaves on the people who enter it. Former inmates often talk about carrying the prison with them long after they're released. The sound of the morning bell, the pressure of constant surveillance, the fear of stepping out of line. For some, Angola becomes a memory that never stops echoing. For others, it becomes a lesson about resilience, strength, and the human ability to endure even the harshest conditions. In every corner of the prison, from the dusty fields to the cold steel cells, Angola's legacy lingers. It is a place where the past and present collide, where punishment extends far beyond the sentence handed down in court, and where surviving the day can feel like an achievement. To understand Angola is to understand the deeper tensions in America's prison system, where history, race, power, and survival intertwine in ways that continue to affect generations. Angola is not just a prison. It is a symbol, a warning, and a reminder that the cost of incarceration extends far beyond the walls that contain it. Something strange happens inside maximum security prisons, something that's almost invisible to anyone who has never lived inside those concrete walls. By day 10, officers say the atmosphere becomes different. Inmates stop looking restless and start looking ready. Ready for what? No one knows. And that uncertainty is what makes this day one of the most unpredictable inside both Angola and Attica. Inside these prisons, tension doesn't need noise to grow. It grows in silence, in the click of a metal food slot sliding open, in the echo of boots walking down a tier, in the way inmates watch everything like cameras with beating hearts. And today, the walls themselves seem to be listening. A morning where every sound feels too loud. The sun barely rises over Angola Penitentiary before the officers begin to sense it. Angola is massive, an 18,000-acre institution built on the land of a former slave plantation. Most inmates here are serving life sentences with no chance of parole. That fact alone changes the way a prison breathes. On day 10, the air feels heavier. Even the wildlife seems quiet. Officers walking the long ranges notice inmates sitting on their bunks, silent, staring straight ahead. No shouting, no arguments, just a strange calm, The kind that makes new officers place their hands a little closer to the radio mic clipped to their vest. At Attica Correctional Facility in New York, the place known worldwide for the 1971 Uprising, Day 10 feels different too. Officers say the morning silence sends an instinctive chill through the body. The facility is old, built like a fortress, and every clank of metal echoes through the blocks like a warning. Veteran correctional staff can read body language better than psychologists. They can tell when someone is hiding anger, fear, or frustration. And today, almost every inmate seems deep in thought, too deep. It's not violence they're expecting. It's resistance, rebellion, or something that looks like both, but is neither. 2. When breakfast turns into a battle of wills. In both prisons, breakfast is usually fast and loud. But today, the cafeterias and cell blocks feel like theaters waiting for a show to start. Food is served, grits, eggs, toast, oatmeal, depending on the state budget and the day of the week. Officers watch inmates take their trays, but the real focus is on what the inmates don't do. They don't complain. They don't joke. They don't even move like normal. And for a correctional officer, silence can be more dangerous than noise. At Angola, an officer notices a lifer picking at his food without eating it. When asked what's wrong, the inmate simply says, "This place feels different today." At Attica, prisoners glance at each other across the tables. No words, just nods, as if they're all aware of something unspoken in the air, a feeling that doesn't need language. And here's the truth most people don't understand. Inside prison, atmosphere is a form of communication. When everyone feels the same thing, it spreads like smoke. 3. The tipping point, a single moment. Around late morning, something changes. At Attica, a routine cell search ends with an inmate staring at the officer longer than usual. Not threatening, not angry, just waiting, as if he expects the officer to make the first move. At Angola, 2 inmates who normally avoid each other stand near the same gate, not fighting, just silently present. Cooperation between rival groups is rare, and when it happens without explanation, officers pay attention. By noon, supervisors at both prisons quietly increase patrols. No alarms, no lockdown orders, just a shift in posture, a readiness. Because today, confrontation doesn't come from violence. It comes from the possibility of violence. And in maximum security prisons, that's enough to turn every second into a calculated move. 4. Inmates reflect what freedom feels like when you don't have it. The psychological breaking point of Day 10 isn't anger. It's reflection. This is the day inmates begin to fully understand the weight of their surroundings. At Angola, a man serving life without parole sits on his bunk staring at a small window with bars thicker than his wrist. He whispers to another inmate, 10 days in, and I already forgot what open sky looks like. At Attica, a younger inmate who hasn't adapted yet tells his cellmate, the noise doesn't bother me. It's the quiet. He's right. The quiet exposes everything. Regret, isolation, fear, memories of the outside world. This is the day many inmates stop pretending the prison is temporary. It becomes real, fully, painfully real. 5. When night falls, the walls go back to listening. By night, both Angola and Attica return to the same silence they started with. But now the officers know what it means. Inmates aren't planning an uprising. They aren't preparing an attack. They're adjusting. This is the psychological shift where prison stops feeling like a place you are visiting and starts feeling like the world you live in. For officers, that shift is terrifying. For inmates, it's devastating. For the prison system, it's predictable. And as lights turn off tier by tier, one truth becomes clear. Day 10 is when the human mind stops fighting the walls and starts negotiating with them. The walls don't talk, but today they listen. When most people think of prison, they picture the daytime, the movement, the noise, the routines. But correctional officers will tell you the real story begins after 10 p.m. That's when the third shift takes over, when the prison becomes something else entirely. Inside Angola Penitentiary and Attica Correctional Facility, nighttime isn't just a schedule. It's an entirely different world. This chapter explores what happens when the lights go down, when inmates retreat to their cells, and when officers begin the shift known for its unpredictability, its silence, and its psychological pressure. 1. When lights out doesn't mean lights off inside the mind. At Attica, 10 p.m. signals the start of what's supposed to be quiet hours. But officers who've worked the third shift for years say that this is the time when they stay the most alert. There are no programs running, no yard time, no chow line, nothing but the halls, the cells, and the shadows. Yet paradoxically, this is when inmates think the most. Night removes distractions. With no noise to drown out thoughts, the mind becomes louder than the echoing corridors. An inmate serving 25 to life once told a counselor, "The night shift is when your regrets wake up." At Angola, where many inmates are serving life with no parole, nighttime is when existential dread settles in. Officers walking long agricultural fields, dorm units, and cell blocks often hear whispers, soft conversations about families, mistakes, fears, and futures that may never come. The third shift is quiet, but mentally, it's the loudest period of the day. 2. The officers, guardians of a sleeping fortress. Night shift officers know they're working during the most vulnerable hours. There are fewer staff, fewer supervisors, and fewer eyes watching the tiers. Every footstep echoes. Every voice carries. Every movement is amplified. Officers at Attica say that the building itself feels alive at night. Creaking pipes, distant doors clanking, the hum of old ventilation systems. Angola officers describe the massive land around them as too quiet, especially when fog rolls in over the former plantation grounds. One veteran Angola correctional officer once described the shift like this: "You're the only thing standing between silence and chaos." Night brings two big challenges: unpredictable inmate behavior, the psychological strain of long hours in darkness. The officers must check cells every 30 minutes, documenting movements, ensuring safety, and confirming that no one is trying to harm themselves. Night is when emotional breakdowns happen, when inmates spiral, when depression hits hardest. In Attica, with its high tiers and narrow walkways, a single incident can trigger a security issue across multiple blocks. Night officers are trained to move quickly, quietly, and deliberately, never rushing, never panicking. The third shift isn't physically demanding. It's psychologically demanding. 3. When insomnia spreads through the block. Correctional officers say sleep deprivation is a silent epidemic in maximum security prisons. At Angola, inmates serving long sentences often stay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, pacing their cells, or sitting by the bars listening for distant sounds. At Attica, insomnia mixes with anxiety, producing moments when the entire tier is awake at 2 a.m. You can tell who's asleep by the faint rhythmic breathing, and who isn't by the glowing reflections in their eyes. One Attica inmate once said, "You can hear the whole block thinking." Officers walking the ranges will see inmates reading legal papers under dim lights, others writing letters they might never send, some doing push-ups to distract themselves, a few crying quietly into their pillows. Night doesn't hide emotions. It exposes them. 4. The witching hour, midnight to 3 a.m. Officers across the United States commonly refer to this window as the danger zone, not because inmates are violent, but because this time frame tends to trigger psychological breaks. Around midnight, the temperature drops inside the blocks. The hallways feel colder. The silence becomes thick. At Angola, this is when some inmates begin talking to themselves, processing trauma, fear, or memories of the outside world. Officers don't interrupt unless it escalates. At Attica, inmates sometimes call out to each other in low whispers, checking on someone who sounds distressed or simply trying to remind themselves they're not alone. And then there are the incidents that officers dread: panic attacks, mental health crises, self-harm attempts, sudden inmate agitation. One Angola sergeant once said, "People think the danger is fights. It's not. It's the mental spiral that comes out of nowhere." Night is when the mind plays tricks, and officers must catch the signs before they turn into emergencies. 5. The final hours, when dawn feels like a lifeline. By 4:30 a.m., both Angola and Attica begin transitioning back into motion. Officers start early morning counts, ensuring every inmate is accounted for. But the emotional shift is noticeable. Hope returns with the sun. Inmates who struggled through the night seem calmer. Officers feel relief that the hardest part of the shift is over. The building no longer feels like a pressure cooker. At Attica, the first rays of sunlight cut through the narrow windows, illuminating dust in the air. At Angola, sunrise stretches across thousands of acres, touching the fields, towers, and fences. It is the most peaceful moment the prison will have all day. Night finally lets go. The third shift exhale is real. A breath that officers and inmates share without ever acknowledging each other. And as the new shift arrives, one reality becomes clear. Surviving the night in a maximum security prison isn't about strength. It's about endurance, mental, emotional, and psychological. The daytime may show the rules, but the night shift? It shows the truth. For years, the public has looked at prisons like Angola and Attica as isolated worlds, sealed off from ordinary life, disconnected from everyday struggles. But the truth is far more complicated. What happens inside these institutions doesn't stay inside. It spreads outward, touching families, communities, correctional staff, and entire regions in ways people rarely imagine. This chapter looks deeper into the emotional and psychological cost of incarceration, not just for the inmates, but for everyone surrounding these prison systems. Inside Angola and Attica, the pressure is constant. Inmates endure years of routines, restrictions, and emotional strain. But the officers, counselors, nurses, and even the administrators also absorb the tension. Studies on correctional work in the U.S. show some of the highest rates of stress-related illnesses among all public safety professions. Heart problems, sleep disorders, PTSD-like symptoms. Many officers admit that the job changes them. They age faster. They struggle to unwind at home. Some say they no longer feel safe anywhere, even outside the prison walls. An Angola officer once said after retiring, "You don't just clock out. The job follows you home." And an Attica mental health worker confessed, "You try to help people who are trapped, and the feeling of being trapped rubs off on you." The emotional weight is shared across the population. Families of inmates carry a different kind of burden. Visiting days at Attica show mothers, partners, and children waiting in long lines, sometimes traveling 4 or 5 hours to see their loved ones for just a short period. Many of them describe a kind of shadow sentence. They're not behind bars, but they feel punished all the same. Angola's remote location makes visits even harder. Families often travel across state lines or spend their last savings just to maintain a connection. The children feel it the most. They grow up with a parent they can't touch except through plexiglass. Their birthdays are marked by letters instead of candles, and their milestones, first day of school, first heartbreak, first job, unfold without one half of their family present. Research shows children of incarcerated parents experience higher levels of anxiety, withdrawal, and academic struggle, not because they're destined for difficulty, but because losing a parent to the system creates a crack in their emotional foundation. And yet, the cost of incarceration isn't only emotional. It's financial and societal. Angola is one of the largest maximum security prisons in the United States, and Attica remains among the most expensive facilities to operate in New York. Taxpayers unknowingly fund the medical care, food services, utilities, and staffing required to keep thousands of people behind bars. Every lockdown, every emergency response, every long-term hospitalization, all of it leaves a mark on state budgets. Communities near these prisons also feel the impact. Angola is a world unto itself, built on thousands of acres, employing entire generations of families. Towns nearby are economically tied to the prison. Without it, some would struggle to survive. Attica, with its dense surrounding communities, influences local business, housing, and employment. Prisons aren't isolated. They're deeply woven into the structure of surrounding areas. But the deepest cost may be psychological. Year after year, inmates live with the consequences of their mistakes, but they also learn to adapt in ways that change their identity. Many enter the system angry or confused. Over time, they become quiet, observant, guarded. They learn to mask their emotions, to read signals in the room, to calculate every move for safety. When they're released, if they're released, these habits follow them. Some succeed in rebuilding their lives. Others struggle because the outside world doesn't operate on the same strict, high-alert system that prison taught them. Inside Attica and Angola, you can almost feel this psychological evolution happening. Some inmates develop resilience, finding ways to cope with the loss of freedom. Others crumble under the weight. The system isn't designed to heal, it's designed to contain. And containment has a price. As this documentary closes, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Prisons are not just buildings. They are emotional ecosystems. Every officer walking a tier, every inmate staring into the dark at 3 a.m., every child waiting by a phone, every community relying on prison jobs. Everyone pays something. Some pay with time. Some pay with fear. Some pay with memories they can't erase. But the system continues. Day after day, shift after shift. Life inside Angola and Attica doesn't stop for anyone. It moves forward with the echo of bars closing, the hum of security gates, the quiet footsteps in long, dim corridors. And in the middle of it all are real people, flawed, resilient, frightened, hopeful, shaped by a system far bigger than any individual. As you step away from this story, remember that behind every statistic, every headline, and every prison wall is a human story, one shaped by choices, circumstance, and a system struggling to balance safety with humanity. The goal of this documentary has never been to sensationalize, but to illuminate what daily life truly feels like inside two of America's most infamous prisons. If there's one message to take with you, it's this. Understanding the system is the first step toward changing it. If you enjoy real, gripping prison documentaries and true stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with your friends and family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss more shocking and exclusive content.